Hello, I'm meteorologist Matt DeMaria at the National Weather Service office in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this is the 2025-2026 winter outlook for central northern New Mexico. Let's get started. First, I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about the typical winter weather hazards that we have here in New Mexico because the list is quite extensive. We can get extreme cold outbreaks. Generally, these come from Arctic air masses that spill down from Canada and into eastern New Mexico, and sometimes they can make it into central and western New Mexico as well. We can get heavy snow. Generally, that's in the northern mountains where we get the heaviest snow. Snow squalls, those oftentimes occur along Pacific fronts in central and western New Mexico. High winds can really occur all winter, especially during the late winter months. As we head into February, we see a lot of high wind events, and that can lead to blowing snow if we have a substantial snowpack on the ground. Avalanches, while not particularly common, they can occur in the northern mountains, most likely in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, where this terrain is steeper and they get the most snow. Fog and freezing fog are not very common, but mountain valleys and the eastern plains can sometimes get that. Sleet and freezing rain, again, not very common, but most common in eastern New Mexico. And then the dust storms have become more common during the winter months, particularly during the end of winter, if it's been a dry winter like we saw last February in Roswell, for example. And wildfires can occur during the winter as well. We don't really see big, giant forest fires like we do during the spring months, but we can see grass fires and other smaller fires during the winter. Here's a look at the average seasonal snowfall for New Mexico, and as you can see, the heaviest snow totals tend to follow the mountain ranges pretty closely. That's because snow is very elevation dependent. That's kind of for two reasons. Part of it is it's colder up in the mountains, so the precipitation is more likely to fall as snow than rain in the lower elevations. But also it's because of a phenomenon called orographic lift, where the mountains actually lift and condense air, forcing the precipitation to eventually fall down as snow. And so you can see pretty clearly that the northern mountains get the most snow, in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in particular, where 20 plus feet is average. We can sometimes see up to 30 feet as well during our snowier years. But snow is not always driven just by the mountains. There's also a phenomenon called mesoscale banded precipitation, where it's just basically where we see snow bands that set up, and they're not necessarily always over the mountains. They could be anywhere. Oftentimes it's in the eastern plains. And so with that, we can see heavy snow totals that vary over a very short distance. So you could be a couple miles away from someone and they barely got any, but you got 6 inches. That's the type of events that we're talking about. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about the winter products that we issue, because I know this can be kind of confusing sometimes. We issue winter weather advisories, winter storm watches and warnings, cold weather advisories, extreme cold watches and warnings, and those are new as of last year. So this will be the second year with extreme cold watches and warnings. We also have blizzard watches and warnings. We had some of those last year, if you can remember, and ice storm warnings, which are exceedingly rare in New Mexico. So really, what is the difference between a watch, a warning, and advisory? Well, a watch means it's time to get ready. Generally, the storm is still 48 plus hours out when we issue watch. So this is kind of the heads up of, hey, this storm could be big. We don't have exact snow totals yet, but this is something you need to watch out for. An advisory generally means the storm is within 48 hours or within 24 hours even. And it means that we are expecting minor impacts, low end accumulations. Doesn't mean there can't be impacts in your local area, but it's generally, we're not thinking major power outages, major road closures, that sort of thing. And a warning, this is when you really need to pay attention. This means the system is within 48 hours and it could be a life-threatening situation. We're looking at high snow totals for your area. And to make it clear that our advisory and warning criteria is different based on where you are. So in Albuquerque, the criteria is different than if you're in Angel Fire, because Angel Fire, they can handle more snow. And so they need more snow for us to issue a warning, whereas the criteria for Albuquerque would be much lower because snow is less common here and it'll be more impactful from less accumulation. So So it does vary based on where you are in the state, but in general, so if you look at this map on the right, this is an example winter storm from last February. You can see in the pink where we have winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories. So generally, with this kind of situation, the northeastern portion of the state is probably where they're going to get the heaviest snow, and we're thinking there could be major road closures, there could be power outages, there could be livestock loss, etc. And so that's why we're highlighting those areas. But in the advisory areas are, you could see some snow. We're not as confident. Maybe the temperatures are marginal. There's just less uncertainty overall, or more uncertainty rather. So this kind of gives you a little snapshot. I know that these can be confusing sometimes when we have multiple hazards out for an area, but hopefully this clears a little bit of that up. So we had a pretty good monsoon season, especially for central and eastern New Mexico, not so much in the west, but around 80% of the state remains in some level of drought, with about 10% of the state remained in extreme drought, and that's mostly far western New Mexico. So we did see some improvements with the monsoon season, but we are still carrying quite a bit of drought right now, and the soil moisture does remain below average, really for all areas west of the Central Mountain Chain. And that's important because the soil moisture before we start building up that snowpack determines how efficiently the snow will melt and run off during the spring months. So if we have wet soils in the fall, then the snowpack comes on top of that, but when the snow melts in the spring, it'll run off efficiently, meaning that will fill up the streams, fill up the rivers, and eventually the reservoirs as well. So unfortunately, the soils are kind of dry right now, so the runoff will not be as efficient once we get into the spring months. I think we get more questions about El Nino during the wintertime than any other question. And so I'm going to break it down real quick here what El Nino is and how it impacts New Mexico during the winter. So El Nino is part of what we call the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, and this is influences the climate worldwide. It's really the greatest source of seasonal climate variability worldwide. It's not just a New Mexico thing, not just a US thing, it's a worldwide thing. It has to do with the temperatures in the Eastern Pacific. So there's three phases of ENSO. There's El Nino, which is when it's warmer than average. Neutral is when those temperatures are near average, and La Nina when the temperatures are below average. This year, like last year, we are in a La Nina pattern. What exactly does that mean for us? Well, it means that the jet stream is probably going to be farther north. That means they're going to get more rain in places like Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Montana. And it means that it's harder to get those storms to come down to the desert southwest where we are. And so it means we'll probably have periods of dry and warmer than average weather for a couple weeks or at a time where we don't see any storms. It doesn't mean we won't get any snow at all, but we'll still get storms that may get down here. It's just overall, it makes it harder to get our average snow during La Nina years. Now we're in a weak La Nina, so the pattern is not as strong as it would be during a strong La Nina year, but we still tend to see that relationship with drier than average weather over New Mexico. And there's other factors that can play a role. So there's the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, that and Julian Oscillation, among others that will impact our temperatures and precipitation to a lesser extent. If you want more information about those, I'll have some links at the end where you can find that. On to the outlook. So this is the official precipitation outlook as of October 16th from the Climate Prediction Center. And it is calling for a lean towards slightly below average precipitation for all of New Mexico, with the greatest signal in the southern half of the state. So this does not mean it's a slam dunk, definitely going to be below average, but it means there's a slightly higher chance because of that La Nina pattern that we talked about before that keeps the jet stream farther north. So during La Nina years, the relationship between our snow and the La Nina is less significant in the northern mountains, and it's stronger in the southern deserts. So if there's any area that has a chance to see near to potentially even above average precipitation, it would probably be the far northern mountains near the Colorado border and in southern Colorado as well, which is important important because it impacts our water supply. A lot of our water actually comes from southern Colorado because all of that drains off and comes into the Rio Grande, where we have a lot of reservoirs. So potentially, if Colorado is near average, that would be a good sign, even if we're below average here. Now on to the temperature outlook. They're expecting to see near to above average temperatures, particularly in southern and western New Mexico. The signal's a little bit stronger actually than what we saw with the precipitation. But something to keep in mind is that during La Nina winters, it's common that we see these cold air outbreaks that come all the way down from Canada, spill into the plains. And sometimes they can sneak through the mountains and make it into here to Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and even into western New Mexico as well. We had one of those events last year. I'm sure everyone remembers, where most of the state was single digits or well below zero even for an extended period of time. And so we can still have an above average temperature for the entire season, but still get a few of those cold outbreaks along the way. This just means that overall we're expecting it to be above average when all is said and done. So if you want more information about this winter outlook, then you can check out our official winter outlook on our webpage or at this link here. This will go really into the details about the Madden-Julian Oscillation, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, give you more information on El Nino, what some of the climate models are saying. So if you want that information, feel free to check that out. We have winter weather safety information on our website, and of course, stay tuned to our homepage all winter long for the most recent weather information. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at our webmaster account. Thank you and have a great winter.